Hey everybody, Brian Goulet here, gouletpens.com, and this is episode number 182 of Goulet Q&A, and I'm excited to be back here. Again, I picked it up last week after being off for a while, and I gotta say, you guys stroked my ego pretty good. You were really forgiving last week. Everybody was like, oh, it's so good to have you back. It was really cool. So it's like being welcomed back by old friends. So I'm really happy to be back doing Q&A again. You were very forgiving. Thank you. I didn't hear any complaints about audio quality or anything like that. I was trying to be very upfront. Again, you know, we're in between videographers right now. I'm having to edit this together myself. So I appreciate all the grace that you're giving me. It's really phenomenal. One thing that I am kind of interested in, I tried something different. Previously in older Q&As, I had been actually picking up the products and showing you and zooming in and out. Last week, for the sake of time, I thought it would, maybe work better and be worth trying. I overlaid pictures of the products I was talking about. So I think maybe what I'll do, I'll try that again this week. I'll overlay some pictures of what I'm talking about, and then I'll only pull the actual pens themselves if I'm like demonstrating a specific activity with it that I couldn't cover in a picture. So we're gonna try that out and see how that feels. I don't really have anything to like demonstrate a lot today, so today I'll really mainly be picture overlays. And you can just let me know how that feels. So that's some feedback that you can help me with for this week, since I didn't really get a lot of mention of it last week or anything like that. So, just to kind of catch you up on what's been going on with me for the last week. I've been exercising regularly, just kind of a personal thing. Gotten my diet much more under control. I'm kind of going back to a little bit modified version of what I did when I lost 65 pounds 4 years ago, which is, for me, counting calories, which I know is not everybody's strategy, but it does help me a little bit, and then just exercising regularly. So really the calorie counting thing, it's more about what you eat than how much, and I get all that stuff, but just for me personally, quantity of food is one of my biggest problems, so it helps me to limit my quantity. So I'm using my MyFitnessPal app. That's what I used before 4 years ago. It helped me out a lot. It's keeping me accountable. It's annoying to have to track every little piece of food that I eat, but because it's so annoying to track it all, I find that I'm like, oh, I kind of want that little snack. I'm like, I don't feel like entering it into the app. I'm just not going to eat it. For me, that works. I don't know. It's just a weird little thing. So it just happens to work for me. So that's what I'm doing. And then I've been exercising regularly. I'm not exercising, ridiculous amounts. It's maybe 25 to 30 minutes a day. So it's just a part of my morning routine. I'll do a little bit more if I have some time on the weekend or something like that. But, got a busy life right now. So if I can fit in a 2-mile run, or an 8 or 10 mile bike ride, that's what I'll do, and I'll just try to make that work. And then if I can limit my diet, that's really what's going to happen. So I've lost like 7 or 8 pounds so far, which is a lot of it's just initial stuff. I know it's not going to stay at that pace right now, but I've been for the last 7 to 10 days, something like that, and I've lost that. So I'm feeling a little bit better, but I just feel better because I'm on the right track. Anyway, I've talked enough about that. So let's see here. I'm still looking into some like goals to set for myself. I've actually kind of initially set a goal of losing 10 pounds by October 7th. I'm pretty close to that goal already, but I need to be there on October 7th. So I've got that as a goal. 205 is really where I feel pretty good. I'm around just under 230 right now, so I got a bit ways to go. So it'll be a journey for me, especially coming up on the holidays with all the good food and stuff. Kids are in school now. They finished out their first week last week. They were really good. Our daughter is in kindergarten. Her drop-offs went not so ideally towards the end of the week, but we kind of talked to her about it, and she just, it's a big transition not having any of her friends anymore that she had in preschool, but she's making some friends now and stuff, so she's going to be just fine. It's probably as rough for me and Rachel as it was for any of the kids, but they're doing well, all things considered. So Rachel's on her adjusted schedule now, so she's leaving at 2 o'clock here, knocking off for the day, taking care of the kids, which has been kind of nice, honestly, for her, as well as, she's able to kind of take care of stuff around the house so that when I come home, we get to have dinner and have family time together, and we're not like doing laundry and chores and stuff like that. So it's nice. It's an adjustment, but we're getting there. As far as her company goes, it's been a relatively quiet week around here. We did get to, have a visitor here. We got to meet with our new Lamy rep and get some, information about kind of our relationship with Lamy moving forward, and it's looking very positive. So I can't go into great details about any of that, but it was a really fruitful visit, and I'm very optimistic about the developments that we're going to have with Lamy in the future. Some cool stuff on the horizon there. We've had some cool content that we put out. So Monday matchup this week was back. We took a break last week, but it was back. we have this cool blog which Sarah helped us put together on how to use empty ink bottles, which is kind of cool because we have a lot of them. I know sometimes you will empty them yourselves, but we also offer them because we're doing ink samples and stuff all the time, and rather than just recycling all the bottles or whatever, we figure we sell them for $1 or whatever. Some of them are a little more than that, but give you some ideas for how you could use them. So they're pretty cool. Pretty cool. And then we launched a couple of things this week. So we have Lamy oblique and left-handed nibs. Those are pretty cool. So we got a blog post out on those if you want to get some description on it. I think they're pretty interesting because you often don't see oblique nibs, especially coming from standard offerings from pen manufacturers. So it's a really cool opportunity for you to get to try to an oblique nib. If you've never tried one, if you already have a Lamy, you can get a spare nib, minimal investment. Typically you have to spend quite a bit or do a custom grind or something to get an oblique. So I think it's pretty interesting for kind of just, the every person to be able to try an oblique nib. So check those out. And I share my experience with them on there. We have the Caran d'Ache 849, which is these crazy bright hexagonal Caran d'Ache pens. They're pretty interesting. We announced them a while ago, but we got kind of shorted on stock for a bit, so we just got stock in now. So we have them, a little blog post on them, kind of talking about what they're all about. Pretty solid pens, nice kind of mid-range, maybe a next level kind of sort of pen, but it could be an introductory pen if your budget allows it. So really interesting, bright colors, great quality because it's, Caran d'Ache is a Swiss brand and they don't mess around when it comes to quality and stuff. So pretty decent. And then got an awesome Thursday things this week that Sarah put together with highlighters or neon. So pretty brightly colored one there, inspired by our Caran d'Ache, and that's in there. And then, relating to Q&A last week, had over 10,000 views, which is higher than normal for a Q&A, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that was just because I went so long last week that maybe you couldn't watch it all in one shot, or if it was just, we hadn't done anything in a while and you're happy to see me back. So either way, I'm just glad that you're enjoying this, and I'm going to try and keep you going, keep you interested here. So some of the other product things that we've got going on. Oh, we also have Artelier Gargoyle. We have a new color of wax called Light Coral, so kind of a light pink color. So if you like that, go check it out. We also got restocked on our 1798 J. Herbin Amethyst de L'Oral, so you can check that out. We were really shorted the first time that we had it, about a week and a half ago. I don't remember the exact date. Maybe it was last week. Was it last week? No, it was a week before. But either way, go check it out. We have pretty decent stock now, so it's not expecting it to sell out like, within 14 minutes like it did last time. So it's a beautiful ink. It's kind of like a Lamy Dark Lilac kind of color with some silver sparkle in it, so check it out. And then the Traveler's Notebook Olive, which actually has become my daily carry notebook. I don't know why. I was using I've used my passport size Traveler's Notebook for years, and I've carried it around quite a bit. Where the heck is the thing? I haven't carried it around clearly in the last couple of months here because I've got it tucked away somewhere. But basically, since I snagged one of these for myself, dang, where is it? Here it is. I put it in my top drawer. Still getting used to this place. So I've been using this thing and it's pretty cool, but I don't know, I just like the larger kind of format size of this. It seems that just the way that I'm taking notes on the regular size notebook works better. A lot of the meetings that I'm in, I take more of like a full page of notes. So I just have a lot that I'm really taking advantage more of a full size. So it's totally up to you. The pocket size one, the Passport, I've been using that. I would carry that around in my actual pocket better. This one's a little more pocket consuming, but I keep this around in my backpack. So it's pretty cool, and I like the olive color. I don't know. So check those out. We were shorted like several times previously and they just disappeared. We have good stock of them now. So if you're interested in one of those, go check it out. We may be doing some stuff on the pricing on some of those too. I think we're looking to put those on sale pretty soon, so go check those out because now we actually have stock of them. It's pretty exciting. And then some stuff that's coming, products that are going to be coming soon. The Lamy Ion is around the corner. It's not going to be like tomorrow or anything, but I think within the next couple of weeks we're going to have that in, so be on the lookout for that. We're also going to have the Pilot Extra Fine Falcon. with gold trim. So we've only had it in the rhodium trim, but if you like the gold trim better and you want that extra fine nib, that's going to be a possibility here pretty soon. And then have some new inks that are going to be on the way. I don't think we've made it public yet, but they are coming, so that's going to be interesting. So be on the lookout for that. New ink is always exciting. Several different colors, and I'm pretty excited about these, so be on the lookout for those. The Stipula Passaporto, I keep hearing, is coming. I know once it becomes available, it's going to be available in large quantities, so I think it's around the corner, so be ready for that. The Edison Nouveau Fall Premiere is going to be coming kind of towards the end of this month. It's a couple of weeks away, so be ready for that. And the Twsbi Classic White and Turquoise, we have those on order. They will be on the way relatively soon. They might be a one-shot deal, I'm not sure. So if you're interested in those, just kind of get your budget ready. And then there's lots of other newer stuff that's still kind of a secret right now. We're in the process, since we moved, we came back, and then all of our vendors and stuff are now kind of coming at us with stuff because we were kind of holding back from taking on anything new during our move, and now it's kind of like, whew, floodgates have opened. And then just, I looked through a lot of your comments last week on Q&A. Thank you for leaving so many thoughtful comments. Appreciate the feedback about how the video is doing, and then also answering the question of the week. So I was really curious on the question of the week to see, the question of the week was about, you know, when you're using a fountain pen, do you tend to write in cursive or in print? And I didn't go through every single question and like scientifically measure out the numbers and stuff like that, but my gut was kind of telling me it was about 70-30 split, leaning towards cursive. So I thought that it would pretty much fall in that way. And it was kind of interesting just seeing, like, depending on your background, your schooling really, especially if you got like an engineering or an architectural background, like it's block print all the way, whereas others just tend to lean towards cursive. So I just think that's interesting, and it really kind of supported my notion that it's really up to however you're most comfortable writing, but that most people might tend to lean towards cursive. So that kind of validated that. And then it was interesting just hearing about some of you with your like hybrid fonts that you've come up with too. Right? If you don't like doing certain letters, or if you have a certain training, but then when you switch to fountain pens, you know, you wanted to do it, but you didn't have time to learn the whole new thing, so you just came up with a hybrid. Pretty interesting. So that was cool. I appreciate y'all sharing that. I'm going to try to like maybe just give my thoughts or recap on the previous week's Q&A question of the week. So it's kind of a new thing I'm trying out. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So we'll get right into the questions, pen and ink questions. This first one is from Franz JPM on Twitter. Will you ever release an updated version of the top 5 starter pens video? I do get asked about this from time to time. Certain videos, especially ones that are really popular, you notice they might be a few years old, and you're like, all right, there's got to be updated thing. These pens have got to be out of date. I gotta say, I looked at this one. So this is the top 5 fountain pens for newbies. I think it's our number 2 video of all time. I think the top 7 fountain pen mistakes video has surpassed it at this point. But for the longest time, I think it's like a 5 or 6 year old video. For the longest time, the top 5 fountain pens for newbies has been our top viewed video of all time, which is kind of cool. So for that one, I looked at it. So the pens that I had in there were the Platinum Preppy, the Pilot Metropolitan, the Jinhao, X750 I believe I put in there, but really the X450 and 750 could be interchangeable. I had the Lamy Safari and the Pilot Varsity. And I put them all in there very intentionally. I thought about it because, you know, in your question, I think it was raised in there about like, what about something like the Twsbi Eco or something like that? And it's like, you know, looking at those 5 pens, I honestly still support all of those pens as great starter pens. I really do, for all the reasons that I already said in the video. The Twsbi Eco would be one that I think would be a contender in there because it's such a great value pen. It's so solid. It's really proven to have kind of a track record of being a good performer. That was something that was important to me. It's like there are other pens that have come out that are a really good value, that have some cool colors and are great kind of starter pens, but I view it as like, does it have kind of a legacy, and is it kind of an icon, and has it proven itself to be a great starter pen, not just by my opinion, but by kind of the fountain pen community? And all 5 of those pens really hold up, I feel. The Twsbi Eco, I think, would kind of give those other pens a run, but that pen is just not as widely kind of distributed as the other one, so it's not quite as popular. It's definitely a great value pen. So I think if I had I don't know which of those pens it would knock out, honestly. I still think all 5 of those hold up, and I wouldn't change them if I was to record that video today. I think the Twsbi Eco would get an honorable mention and be like a solid number 6 if I was to expand the list. I've got other pens on there that I'm like, yeah, these are really pretty solid starter pens too, like the Nemesign Singularity. We had a little bit of a kind of a leaking issue with those at first that we worked with Nemesign, and they fixed that issue, and we really have not seen that. So for a while I was kind of hesitant to say like this is really like the great fountain pen, but they fixed that issue, so I feel really solid saying like, yeah, the Nemesign Singularity is really pretty solid now. The Pilot Kakuno is also a great value pen. A little bit different than the Metropolitan, could really kind of fit in there too. The Kaweco Perkeo has not been out very long, just a couple of weeks. I really like that pen. I think that it's definitely not going to be like as iconic as the Kaweco Sport or maybe some of the other like Lamy Safari or anything like that, but I do think that the Perkeo's got some legs on it that could make it a great value pen for somebody who's starting out. And the Faber-Castell Lume too, I think that pen is kind of an underrepresented pen. It's a really great pen. The gunmetal one has just come out. Limited quantities on that, so I know we haven't like really been able to talk about that one a lot, but I've got a matte gunmetal one myself that I really like, and the one complaint that I usually hear about that pen is that it's a little heavy, because it is a pretty solid pen, but the gunmetal one is a little bit lighter. It's like 10 or 11 grams lighter than the other versions, so that right there takes care of that. So I think that all of those are worth a look for sure, but none of those really are like so iconic to me that it knocks out any of the previous 5 that I had in there. So it's a great question. I'm glad you prompted me for it, because it does kind of give me a notion to revisit things from time to time. I get questions about other videos too that are like, oh, does this need to be updated? And the truth is, when I do videos like that are a top 5, top 7, whatever, I put a lot of thought. I talk to my team, they give input. We really give a lot of intentionality about trying to make it as timeless a video as possible. So if we have something that seems like it's kind of a fad, but we don't know that it's really got the longevity, we usually don't include that on that list. So most of them hold up pretty darn well, which is why I think they continue to get the great view counts they do, because it's really pretty solid. But at the same time, there's certainly other ones that are worth mentioning because new products are coming out and stuff like that. So, I could see doing some kind of like top 3, top 5 list of 2017. You know what I mean? Top 5 pens of 2017 under $50 or something like that. Having something be a little more like that. I know, Pen Habit, Matt, has done videos kind of along those lines. And even though he's talked about like not wanting to do this anymore, I actually think that's a pretty interesting kind of cool idea. It's like, pen of the year or top whatever style pen. That's really intriguing to me. I don't usually get my act together to do it by the end of the year because that's our holiday season. We're so stinking busy at that time. It gets really tough to do that, but I might give it some thought. That would be kind of cool. Even if it's not like at the end of the year, even if it happens in January, whatever. It could be something interesting to think about. So anyway, that's kind of my thoughts, just kind of riffing a little bit, but if there are anything else that you think need to be redone, I think that's going to end up being my question of the week this week, is just what else should I revisit, should I redo? Next question I have is from J Drago on Instagram. I'm looking for a good pen for school under $100. I already know about the Metropolitan, Safari, All-Star, Twsbi Eco, etc. What would you recommend, and maybe a matching ink? Oh shoot, I missed the matching ink part. I prepped all the pens and my thoughts on pens, but I didn't do the inks. Okay, anyway, so ones I think, so you rattled off some of the top ones, right? Like those are all ones that I literally just talked about a second ago about what could be in the top 5 pens for newbies, right? Any of those certainly could fit in there. Some other ones that I think are worth kind of mentioning, the Conklin Duragraph is a really solid pen, fantastic value for what it is, could fit in there. The Nemesign Singularity would be a good one. Lots of different colors and stuff to go with. Jinhao, really any of them. You throw a Goulet nib on there, it's even better. Platinum Preppy, eyedropper converted to even would be a great one. The Kaweco Perkeo, lots of different colors there. I don't know what the heck inks you would match to those because the colors are crazy, but Faber-Castell Lume, the Pilot Kakuno, and the Platinum Cool or the Platinum Balance. I don't talk about those pens a whole lot, but they're pretty interesting pens, very durable and stuff like that. So I think any of those, as far as what inks to match, oh my gosh, I just don't even know. Any of these pens that I mentioned have like a full range of colors on them, so you could really kind of go nuts. It's really whatever is appealing to you. I think between, you look at like Noodler's, Diatramentis, Diamine, it's like you pick just from, even from those brands, and you can cover pretty much anything to match it if you want to. For me, for notes for school, I have to really think about it and like put myself back in school, because I didn't discover fountain pens till I was 25. So I have most of the notes and stuff that I do are just on blank paper, or I might have a printout every now and then that I do. But I think about, like, for school, you have a lot of printed notes already and you're writing on it with black letters. So I would think something that's not black might be good, like a dark blue or purple or green or something like that. I don't know, you can really go with whatever you want. There's just so many choices, I can hardly even make a recommendation. You know, so really just kind of go with that. Yeah, that's what I would say. Unless I can just pick some random specific colors. Palette de Roche usually performs pretty well on cheaper paper, and it used to be a little bit out of reach for students because the ink was so expensive. It's definitely a premium ink, but they lowered the price. So it's now $20 for a bottle of that ink, which is not unreasonable. You know, it's not the cheapest, but it's really good performing ink. So you could go with something like, you know, a Konpeki or an Asagao, or even like a Yamabudo if you want the color to really pop. I think any of those would be really good. You know, you go with something like the Diamine's got all kinds of crazy colors. Monteverde ink too is actually pretty decent and could be really good. The Monteverde ink could be good because they have what they call that ITF technology, which is it makes the ink last longer while the pen is uncapped. It keeps it from drying out. That can be really good when you're taking notes and you're just kind of listening. So any of the Monteverde, there's so many colors in their ranges now. I haven't even played with all of them, but a lot of them have pretty decent reviews. You can check the reviews on our site. They're pretty decent. So I recommend you check any of those out. Cool. All right, I got an email here from Bill D. I've only seen one mention about cleaning a new nib before using to remove the manufacturer's coating to prevent poor ink flow. Could you please speak about this in one of your Q&A videos? Here we are. Also, cover the tip about not handling the nibs with your bare fingers to prevent skin oils from contaminating the nib, which could lead to poor ink flow. I've seen this matter covered extensively on calligraphy videos on other channels. Well, Bill, that's because calligraphy nibs are a little different than fountain pen nibs. I know it kind of seems similar, but calligraphy nibs do have a coating on them to help keep them from rusting while they're sitting on the shelf from you know, retailers and stuff like that. So it is very commonly known throughout the calligraphy world that when you get those replaceable nibs that you put into your nib holders, that they have a coating on them. You need to wash it off with, you know, just soapy water before you start using them. And then when you use the ink, which is a thicker ink, it's you're going to have more flow issues if you don't remove that coating. Fountain pen nibs are not that way. Fountain pen nibs come to you already cleaned, so you don't have to clean them. It's commonly recommended that you flush out a fountain pen and use it, not because there's a coating on the nib, but because when they manufacture the feed and the internal components, there could be some machining oils or some slight debris or something from various parts of the process that could be in there. There are a lot of pen manufacturers that already clean out the pens before they come to you, so it's not like a hard, fast rule has to be done everywhere, but it is a good practice to kind of get used to. Whenever you use fountain pens for the first time, go ahead and clean it out. It does not take long. Really just flush it out with water is plenty sufficient before you ink it up for the first time, and then you should be pretty good to go. Me personally, I don't always do that just because I'm so excited when I get a new pen that I really don't even care that much about if I have some flow issues, because I know the first time I clean it out, it's probably going to fix it. Like 95% of the time, just cleaning the pen fixes it. So I usually just kind of like live life on the edge, and I'll get a new pen and just ink it up right away. If I'm not trying to like review it or something like that, if I just want to use it myself, I'll ink it up and do it. If it seems a little dry or has a little flow issues, I'm like, oh, okay, let me clean it out and whatever. But that's just a thing for me. So it's pretty good practice to do it, but it's not the same. It's not like it has the same effect on it as it does with your calligraphy nibs. Because those calligraphy nibs, they're steel nibs often, but they're not stainless steel. They're just a regular steel, maybe with like a chrome coating or something on it, but they're much cheaper nibs, so they're not as made to be as long lasting as the fountain pen nibs are. So fountain pen nibs, they come to you clean. The other ones, they come to you, they rust a lot easier, so they put a coating on there that you got to take off. Cool. That's why you don't hear a lot of people talking about it, because it's not really necessary. All right, next question is from christineIsloc on Instagram. Sorry, I butchered your name. Why don't the steel flex nibs out there have narrower, unflexed points? The ones I've used seem equivalent to a medium nib on noodlers, etc. Calligraphy nibs, on the other hand, go almost needle-like. Is there a reason this is the case to last longer? Which nibs that you carry has the narrowest point? Okay, so clearly we got some calligraphers on here that are kind of crossing over into fountain pen world a little bit, which I think is fantastic, especially if you're coming over from Instagram here. Bill, you came from an email, so I don't know, maybe you're on Instagram. There's a huge Instagram following of calligraphers and stuff like that. A lot of them are kind of coming over the fountain pen world, which is great, because believe it or not, and this is interesting, I actually talked to Jake Weidman, the guy who did this artwork, and I interviewed a couple weeks ago. He validated, because he's coming over from the calligraphy world, and he's like, man, even though they seem so similar, there is just a huge gap between the calligraphy community and the fountain pen community. It's kind of amazing. And I think flex nibs really kind of fall in there and start to blur that line a little bit, which is great, because I think there could be more overlap there. But even still, my background is all in fountain pens. I'm exploring the calligraphy stuff just because I'm kind of need to be aware of it, and I get questions like these to know a little bit more. But I think this is a great question. So I did a little research. I looked at some blogs that explain some of these calligraphy nibs. I've used some calligraphy nibs, some flex nibs a little bit, but admittedly I don't know as much about them as I do about fountain pen nibs. So I educated myself a little bit, and I encourage you to do the same, but I'm going to share with you kind of some of my findings and just some of what I think. So in this instance here, you're talking about how fine, those hairline fine nibs. And when you're going with flex, that's often what you're looking for, is to go as fine as possible in the hairlines, especially if you're doing a script like a copperplate or a Spencerian, because you really want to get those fine lines. And then when you flex it out, you want it to be very dramatic, because that looks the most like what those scripts require. With fountain pens, technically, you can grind those fountain pen nibs to be as fine as the points on those other ones. There's no physical, technical reason why you can't. The thing I will say is that when you do that, it gets really scratchy, for one, which is something that you kind of just get used to when you're using calligraphy, kind of the dip pens. But if you're using a fountain pen, scratchy nibs are like a big no-no, right? And you already get a little bit of that by using a flex nib anyway, just because basically the less surface area that you have on the tip of the nib, the scratchier it's going to feel, the more resistance you're going to feel. Because it's sort of like if you are, I'm trying to think of an example, if you are roller skating on an asphalt road, right? You're going to feel a lot of the pits, a lot of the things, because your wheels are very small. Like, it's just not spreading over a big surface area. Versus if you're riding a bike, it's probably a bad example because there's more factors going into this than just the wheel size. But still, if you're riding a bike, then you're not going to feel as much of every single little bump in that road, because the wheel is larger and the contact it has with the road is a little larger surface area. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes some sense, but long story short, it's not my best analogy that I came up with. Anyway, you win some, you lose some. So what I'm really trying to get at is when you have a finer nib, you're going to feel more of the texture of the paper. So it's just not as appealing, and especially people who are using fountain pens, I definitely think there's a factor of, when you're using a fountain pen, it's for mobility, right? Like the fountain pen, when it existed, when it was created, you were coming from the dip fountain pen experience. That was the writing instrument of the day back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. You would use a dip pen. Everybody used a dip pen. That's how you wrote. And the biggest problem with that was portability. You had to carry the ink with you, you had to have the nib with you. If you left the ink on the nib, it would dry up, so you had to have something to wipe it off, and it was kind of a whole ordeal. And you would have a whole desk and a slanted thing and all that, and it was a big thing. When the fountain pen was invented, it was like the iPhone of the day. Like, it was a huge deal because you could carry your ink with you in your pen, and your pen was always there ready to write with ink. It was literally a revolution at the time in the writing, not just writing, but in technology, in business, in travel. It was a big deal. So we kind of take that for granted now, but 100 years ago, it was all the rage, right? Especially for people that are traveling a lot. So I think that there is an element when you're using a fountain pen as opposed to a dip calligraphy pen of kind of that, on the go, writing a quick note, cap, uncap, boom, bing, bang, bong, you go, and you keep going. So there's an element of I want to write faster. And when you have that, having a smoother writing nib becomes more important because the faster you go, the rougher it's going to feel. And if you have a scratchy feeling pen, it's just going to be a miserable experience if you're trying to write fast. I think because when you're doing the dip calligraphy stuff, you tend to go slower. So you're just a little more forgiving in that respect. So that's part of it, I think, why you tend to see that a little bit. Also, I think there is a durability aspect to it. So when you're using calligraphy, the dip nibs, they're much less expensive nibs. They're essentially made to be disposable, right? Rarely are they stainless steel. They're usually just a regular steel, sometimes uncoated, sometimes they might have a chrome plating or something like that on it, but often they will have a tendency to rust if you don't dry them off. If you leave the ink on it, you have to wipe the ink off every couple of minutes, even as you're using it, because it can clog, it can rust and stuff like that. So there's a little more care involved with that, and the metal itself is softer. It is not made to last nearly as long as a fountain pen nib is. So there is definitely that aspect to it as well. So with longevity not being as much of a factor with the dip calligraphy nibs, you don't have to worry as much about wear and tear, because oftentimes you're writing and you're trying to really flex those nibs out. Probably you're going to bend those nibs and the metal's going to weaken and those nibs are going to be ruined long before the tipping material or the tip of the nib is going to wear out. Whereas with a fountain pen, if you're using it regularly, they put tipping material on there because it needs to last a long time. The tipping material is harder wearing than the steel that's used for the nib itself. I think it's pretty rare to have tipping material on a calligraphy nib. I could be wrong about that, but I think usually it's just the plain steel, and then you just write with the tip of the steel. So the fact that you are trying to tip the nib on a fountain pen to make it last longer, it kind of narrows your options a little bit in terms of grinding it down finer and stuff like that. So again, the longevity factor, the portability factor, I think all that comes into play, and just how it's used comes into play. But that said, you're asking me about if you do want to use a flex nib fountain pen, which is the finest, the narrowest point. So the Noodler's one, technically they call that one like a fine medium. So yes, it can be a little medium. It depends on the paper that you're using too. It's a pretty wet writing pen, so if you're using it on more absorbent paper, it is going to write more like a medium. Or if you are used to flexing it out a lot and those tines have maybe spread a little bit, it's certainly going to write more like a medium. But if you're using an ink that is pretty tight, a little drier, not a gusher, and you're using a paper that is not super absorbent, then it's going to write a little finer, like more on the fine side. But it is a very, very wet pen, so it's going to have a tendency to write a little broader anyway. And then the what was I going to say? The one that aside from the Noodler's one, the Pilot Falcon in the soft extra fine is really going to be about as fine as you can get with a flex pen. They don't advertise that one as a flex pen. They call it soft, and it's definitely not going to flex as much as a calligraphy flex nib would. So you have to be careful about that. There's a lot of videos and stuff like that some of them have modified nibs to add flex to them, and I know more than our fair share of folks have bent the tines on their Pilot Falcons trying to emulate some of the Falcon videos that they've seen on YouTube. But I think that one, although technically it's not a flex would really kind of get you the closest there than your noodlers. All right, I'm gonna take a little sip of water here because I'm talking a lot and getting thirsty. This next question is from jiyonglovesbeer on Instagram. jiyonglovesbeer. There we go. I believe that there hasn't yet been an intensive review on cartridge inks. As I travel a lot because of work, I happen to prefer cartridges rather than bottled ink. I might be the only one, or I might be the only one who hasn't seen those cartridge reviews. You're not the only one, you know, definitely, especially here, we do not have nearly the demand for cartridges as we do for bottles. I think there's a couple of factors there, and I've talked about this a little bit in the past, so I won't completely belabor the point. I think a big factor has to do with the fact that when you use a cartridge, you're really limited to the pens that take those cartridges. So if you use a pen that accepts a standard international cartridge, you know, just for example, Faber-Castell uses a standard international cartridge. There are a bunch of different brands that use standard international as their size. So you have a little more options there. But other pens, like Lamy for example, the cartridges are proprietary. So you're limited to Lamy color cartridge inks, which there's like 8, you know what I mean? Versus the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of inks that are available in a bottle. So you really limit yourself a lot on the colors. And so the convenience aspect of it really has to be your primary driver. The other factor that I think is just, you know, partly because of the fact that it's limited to the pen model is you don't have the range of colors available, which I kind of just alluded to now that I realize. But I had it as a separate bullet point, so I'm gonna cover it anyway. So, you know, the fact that I think there's a huge reason that a lot of fountain pen people get into fountain pens is because of the different ink choices. Not only is there a factor of, you know, the cartridges themselves being limited by what pen choice you can use it in, but the various pens that you're using, you know, you're limited in your color options if you're only sticking with the cartridge that's available for that pen. And then of course there's an economy aspect to it too. I don't know how much that necessarily matters to everyone, but it's usually like a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio for what you are paying for a cartridge versus a bottle. So for some people this is not a huge deal, especially if you're not using like gobs and gobs of ink in your fountain pens. It might not really be a huge deal. You know, if you're like, well, whatever, I'm going to use a bottle of ink in 2 years, I'll just buy cartridges and then I can change it up and I have more options than tying up my investment into a whole bottle. But it all depends on what floats your boat. There's also a lot of colors that are only available in bottles and they don't even do cartridges, so that's a thing. So I think because of that, that's all big stuff. And then I think another point that I'm completely making this up, but it's just kind of my observation. Most of your hardcore fountain pen enthusiasts, the ones who are really using them on a regular basis and are passionate enough about using them in all the different ink colors and stuff to want to spend their time to create videos and do reviews and all this kind of stuff, most of them are probably pretty deep down the rabbit hole and are using bottles because you know, there's a lot more color options they can use, especially if you're reviewing a lot of stuff on a regular basis. You have a lot more options in terms of combinations of what you can review if you're using bottles. And then I think the bottles are just, they look nice. And so if you are really into fountain pens and you like to have your ink bottles, it's a whole aspect as opposed to having random cartridges just kind of laying around, or the tins of cartridges are okay, but it's not nearly as like, you know, rewarding as a feeling, I guess, aesthetically pleasing to have cartridges as you do having a bottle. That's just kind of a thing. I'm kind of speculating. And I think because most people that are taking the time to do the reviews are really the hardcore enthusiasts, they probably care about those aspects of it more than they do of the convenience. So you just don't get a lot of people that are spending a lot of time doing reviews of it. And then the last thing that I had as kind of a thought as to maybe why this would be is that there's a lot of ink colors are available in both bottles and cartridges. So there's just not, it's like given the option to do the two, I think you just have a lot more options with bottles, especially if you're doing a review. You can do a swab from a bottle a lot easier. You can ink it up in multiple pens. You can, you know, do a lot of different things. You can have more options than you can if you're just reviewing a cartridge. I think The only cartridge reviews that I've really seen done are ones where there's a color that's only available in a cartridge and not available in a bottle, and that's just really not many colors. You know, you have like Pelican Pink, I believe there's a Lamy Violet that's in a cartridge, or has been at some point, and just like really weird random kind of one-off colors that are only available in cartridge form, which really does not represent very much of the ink options out there. So for all those reasons, I think you just don't see a lot of reviews on them. So I don't think it's you. I think it's totally cool, but really you're going to end up seeing more reviews of the ink that comes out of a bottle than you would out of a cartridge. All right, this question is from manojpvr on Instagram. Will the inks, which are not advertised as permanent, disappear one fine morning? You mean like you just wake up and your journal will be empty? No, that's not really how it works. It's not going to be like the joke disappearing ink that you can like buy as a kid or whatever, and then somebody writes a note and then it disappears in 10 minutes or something like that. It really doesn't work quite like that. Fountain pen ink is dye based as opposed to pigment based, and for any of you who do anything with any type of ink or color related stuff, dye is just weaker. It's weaker than pigment-based stuff. So when you have a dye-based thing, it's going to flow smoother in your pen than pigment stuff would, but it's not going to last quite as long, especially when you're talking about UV exposure. Now, is it something you need to be overly concerned about? Not really, unless you have certain uses that you're trying to do. And so, people really kind of debate this a little bit in the fountain pen community. How important is the permanence of the ink? For a long time, you had iron gall ink, you had a couple permanent inks, India ink, stuff like that. And that was like just kind of the only thing that you used if you needed permanence. And you had like a black and maybe a blue black. And that was kind of it. The whole idea of like having colorful and dynamic options for permanent inks is really a relatively new concept within the history of fountain pen usage. A lot of that I attribute to Nathan Tardif. He really believes in having permanent inks and has pushed the envelope a lot in terms of color offerings of permanent inks. There have been some other companies that have followed suit, like Diatramentis has their document inks. There's a couple other companies that have some here and there. No one else has kind of the full breadth of permanent inks like Noodler's, frankly, and Diatramentis has done the document inks, a handful of inks, but nobody else really has even approached having as many permanent inks as that. And I think there's some people that fall in the camp of like, why would you ever use an ink that's not going to last as long as possible? And there's something to be said for that. And other people are like, why do you really need a permanent ink? It usually has a bit of a higher maintenance aspect to it in your pen, so that's got to be taken into account. And it's somewhat limiting on some of the properties and stuff. Usually the shading is not quite as good on those. It can sometimes be a little more absorbent into the paper and stuff. Depends on the properties, but it's really a matter of personal preference. So I think if you are taking care and you're storing your notebook properly, if it's anything that's not you're trying to store for like a long time, like 5 to 10 years or more, you can just use whatever you want. It really doesn't matter quite so much. If you're trying to store something for longevity, for posterity, that's when permanence can maybe play a factor. But that said, you can use a conventional fountain pen ink and you store it in a journal if it's closed in a cool, dark place, not in direct sunlight exposure and stuff like that. You're really going to be okay. It's going to last a very, very long time. It's probably more important the condition of your paper than anything at that point. So make sure you're using pH neutral, acid-free paper is even more important than the ink, because if the paper doesn't last, it doesn't matter what your ink is. Ink's not going to hold the paper together. So you got to be conscious of that. But the main benefit of the permanent ink is if you do have a UV exposure component to it, and if you are anticipating any type of water exposure too, that can make a big difference. So if you think that there's a chance that you might be writing outside in the rain and it starts to rain and you're worried about it smearing or something like that, then of course you can focus on that. Or if you're just have this fear in your mind that you're going to be walking down the street one day with your journal and you're going to trip and you're going to drop your journal into a swimming pool or into a giant puddle or a storm drain or something like that, and you're concerned about that, it would be better to have a permanent ink. in there than it would be a conventional ink. So there's certainly a use for that. And then if you're looking at using it for artwork or anything like watercolor washing or anything, then there's certainly an aspect to that. But no, it's not like you're just going to wake up one day and all of a sudden your ink is going to be gone. If you even have, unless you literally just like wash the thing with water for an extended period of time, the ink's not just going to immediately go, a non-permanent ink. And then if there is something that UV exposure, it's going to happen over weeks, if not months, where the ink would start to fade away. So you would notice that it's getting harder to read and you'd be able to close the notebook and stop it. So it's not like you have to be like paranoid that it's just going to disappear all of a sudden. Cool? So last question I have for this week is a business question, actually. This is from Chintan Pandya on Instagram. Since the Goulet Pen Company has already contributed so much to the fountain pen community, once you grow even more, would you consider hosting introductory fountain pen workshops in collaboration with schools or something similar to promote handwriting and fountain pens in the future? Now that the education system itself is gradually doing away with handwriting totally and switching to typing and even digital textbooks, I believe it's going down the rabbit hole of over-reliance on technology. That last part there is a bit of a much to chew on, and I am really falling like outside of my area of expertise when we start talking about school systems and stuff like that. So I won't really go deep into there. I'll kind of focus on the first part of your question, which is will we consider hosting introductory workshops and stuff like that. I'll be honest with you, our main focus is in the online community. As soon as we go offline and start talking locally, I think it's a very noble and very cool thing to do, but it is really stepping outside of our area of expertise. So it's not something that I've pursued as like, yeah, this is an inevitability that we need to get into. I'm focusing on the things that we do, which is shooting videos, product education, stuff like that. I think it's something even more basic, which is just awareness in general, rather than like sitting down practically teaching, etc. I've got 2 young kids, they're 5 and 7. I sit down, I try to teach them things, but man, it's a whole different thing. I have mad respect for all of our teachers, all of our educators out there, because literally you go to you get a 4-year degree and then you have to go to master's and you get all this stuff to learn how to teach at all, because there's a lot there. And teaching handwriting is a whole other aspect to that. That's a skill that you have to not only have, but then to be able to teach it. So there's a lot there. A lot of us here, honestly, don't really know much about handwriting. Quite honestly, we know about the tools, we know how to use fountain pens, we have our own style of handwriting and stuff like that. But as far as like the formal teaching and being able to teach it and pass it on to kids, we're like stepping outside of our own comfort zone there. So it would be a whole other level of stuff that we'd have to learn to be even comfortable doing that. What I see as something that would be more of an opportunity for us is taking a step back from that a little bit and even linking up with other people in the community who have more of a background in learning handwriting and teaching handwriting to others. There's classes that you can get on Skillshare. There's people that are doing their own kind of courses that you can sign up for through their own website or blog or whatever. That you can do that, like Kara Benz, I know, has done some handwriting workshops. Been some other great folks that have done that kind of stuff too. Then of course you can get more formal into like calligraphy and stuff like that. But even that kind of stuff, I see that as being a more obvious opportunity for us to collaborate and kind of get involved and link up with people that are kind of doing that as their kind of main inspiration. Us here, it's more about customer service. It's about fulfillment. It's about product education, product development, that kind of stuff. That's really like the center of our bullseye. And then how people are using the pens is kind of the outer ring of the bullseye, if you will, if I'm using an archery analogy, I guess. So we're not going to spend as much time focusing on kind of the outer ring as we are in our bullseye. And that's just kind of a practicality aspect of it. So I could see as time goes on that we could maybe get into that and develop it more, but it's not something that's been as obvious of a thing of like, yeah, this is just duh, why aren't we doing this now? Definitely it's a huge thing to kind of tackle with that. And, I have to balance out like how practical is it really to try to, fight the Department of Education about where they're deciding things are going to happen in our schools. For me personally, I view handwriting now as not just a utilitarian means of communication as it was 40 years ago. There are a lot of other means of communication now where the fountain pen, not just the fountain pen, but handwriting in general is a little bit more of an art than it is a core skill set. So it's like if you have a school system that's focusing on core skills like math, science, that kind of stuff, English, literature, whatever, I think that stuff is kind of what they call more like the core curriculum, and then you get into like your arts and your extracurriculars and stuff. I think that's now where handwriting is starting to fall, is more on the arts. And so it raises more of a larger question probably of what's happening with arts in school. I think handwriting now is falling more into the arts, and the arts are getting cut from school systems, which I think is very unfortunate, because I had tremendous benefit from being involved in fine arts and performing arts in my school experience. And I think that our school system needs to be focused on having well-rounded individuals, not just, training teachers and scientists and engineers. All very important roles for sure, but there's a lot of people with a lot of other gifts too. And me personally, I struggled in some of those areas where I really excelled in some of the arts. And now, of course, I view the way that I craft, the way I do business is an art. Sitting down and performing to a degree, I'm very authentic in these videos, obviously, but having the courage to get up and speak in front of potentially thousands of people, or tens of, or in some cases in my videos, hundreds of thousands of people who are watching these videos. Yes, I would not maybe be as comfortable doing that had I not been in show choir in my high school years, wearing a sequins vest tuxedo with tails and singing, Bob Fosse songs. Yes, I did that. So that gave me the courage to be able to do this kind of stuff. So I do believe that stuff is really, really important in terms of just a well-rounded culture in general. But that's really, I'm diverting now, falling off the cliff into the rabbit hole. But that's kind of where I see it. So to answer your question, yes, I believe, especially as my business has gotten bigger, we've been kind of had more influential, I guess, in the larger community. I'm thinking about this kind of stuff, but there's so many opportunities for doing certain things. I have to be practical and think about where are my gifts, where are the gifts of our team, what's the practicality in terms of our time and involvement and stuff like that. And that's kind of an ongoing, continuing conversation within our company, if that makes any sense. All right, my question of the week this week is, if you had your choice to have me update any of the previous Goulet Pens videos, maybe the top 5 video, top 7 video, something like that, or if there's maybe a product review that you feel needs to be updated, wasn't covered thoroughly, or maybe Fountain Pen 101, certain parts of that. I had a lot of conversations with our team about Fountain Pen 101, updating that. If there's any video that you feel really needs to be updated, I would really love to have your feedback on that, because my focus tends to be more on, if it's not like completely utterly a failure and outdated, I'll leave it up there and you can just enjoy that, and it'll just be kind of an older video and you can see kind of the progress, and I'll focus on doing new ones. But if you feel like there's anything that needs to be redone, I would love to know what that is, and I can maybe kind of bump that up on my priority list. That's all I have for this week. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll see you back here next week for 183, and right on.